Firstly, let me make this clear. This is not a video that is created to say you shouldn't get a Logitech wheel. In fact, you absolutely should get one, especially if you're a beginner, on a budget, as long as the price is right, or like me, are a bit of a filthy casual when it comes to the amount of time spent racing at the moment. I'm not here to tell you about the improvements on times versus other wheels, or that the choice of wheel makes any difference to your racing ability. For both of those subjects, I'll point you in the direction of the wonderful Chris Haye, who has done 2 fantastic videos on those subjects. You really should go check him out, like and subscribe. My idea here is to discuss whether or not gaming has moved on beyond the capabilities of the Logitech systems, especially the many out there who are still diligently using older wheels such as the Logitech G27. After all, if it still works, why buy something else, right? Indeed, this is a fair point with all Logitech wheel systems compared to the various stories you hear online about belt-driven systems and their failure potential. What my issue is that games have got closer and closer to realism, and the technologies behind systems such as force feedback and representation of the car's behaviour have improved massively. So is the capability of these games now exceeding the capabilities that the Logitech wheel systems can actually deliver? The Logitech G29 and its now 2 sister models, the Xbox compatible G920 and the new updated G920 with True Force technology, featuring small updates to the gear system and the overall innards of the unit, which may answer some of these questions. I don't know, I haven't tested it, I can only go via online reviews to say that it doesn't really, are probably the most sturdy and value for money options for people wanting a wheel controller for a racing or a driving game. Each wheel is finished to a decent quality and is sturdy, although attaching to desks can lead to the clamp system breaking after extreme stress. The wheel comes with a 3 pedal set and is much improved on the brake pedal resistance versus the older Logitech models. No more tennis balls for your brake pads, please. It also comes with an additional gear shifter if you want to buy that separately, although it is not customizable at all for anything like sequential shifting or handbrake controls without any kind of serious modification. Now, I've had my G29 for nearly 4 years and got the whole lot brand new at the absolute steal of £120 and about £35 for the shifter. The Xbox G920 wheel I managed to pick up separately without the pedals, so it made changing between the platforms a heck of a lot easier. The force feedback in the Logitech wheels is done via a gear-driven system, dual motor force feedback transmission as Logitech calls it, and is now being dubbed True Force, whereas previously it was called Driving Force. What that means is that cogs attached to the motors create the vibration to the driveshaft that the steering wheel is attached to, and those gears are machined in a way to give the user a more quiet experience, but as you'll find out, that's not exactly the case anymore. When this wheel was designed and released back in 2015, yes, 5 years ago, and not moving massively on from the previous release of the G27 in its design, the force feedback communication, as this is effectively a sub £200 toy, was not designed to make you feel every bump and cut in the road. It was more to communicate the feel of the tyres slipping and to understand the feel of what the car itself is doing. And I must stress that the Logitech wheel absolutely does that fantastically for something that costs under £200 normally. But while games have progressed and other manufacturers' wheels have risen up the order for serious sim racers, as arguably games have also done to garner serious esports representation, as a Logitech owner I feel that maybe what the wheel offers isn't what it actually set out to achieve anymore. To test this, I took 3 games which are available on console as well as PC, mainly due to the fact that the mass market appeal of those systems and the price bracket that they are at is probably much more relatable for people buying and using a Logitech wheel system. I tested all of these with the default feedback settings on those games, so I've made no adjustments. I made sure that the wheel was calibrated in each of those games, and I also made sure that the wheel's firmware was up to date by connecting it to my PC, which is actually a very important thing that you should do if you have never done it before. I'm also testing this here on a PlayStation 4 Pro to show exactly what it is, so there's nothing hidden here. I'm not using it on a PC or an Xbox. Again, the most accurate market for these things. The games in question are F1 2020, Gran Turismo Sport, and WRC9, which interestingly all have official wheel partners with other wheel manufacturers. So F1 2020 by Codemasters is an interesting case here because this is the same force feedback as you get in Grid, Dirt 2.0 and other things. Obviously there's a bit more refinement in each one, certainly, but for the Logitech wheel, they all feel incredibly similar. And you can probably hear the rattling at the moment that's going on. And one of the things that F1 tries to do is vibration and grip, and of course this still does very well the loss of grip from the rear. However, one of the main issues that you'll hear in this is the rattling in what I can only think is possibly aerodynamic vibration, and it only ever happens in a straight line. It's not dirty air, there's no impact vibration or anything like that. As we're going to hit here, you'll be able to hear it a little bit more. So I'm not entirely sure what the vibration is, because it's not G-force vibration, it's not traction vibration, it's certainly not vibration as you're turning into the corner. It is literally mostly only in a straight line, and of course it's really quite disconcerting. So again, Fanatec is the real partner at the moment for F1 and the esports thing, and with belt-driven wheels you'll probably feel tension as opposed to the rattle that you get on a gear-driven wheel. So again, maybe this kind of game is a little bit beyond what the gears can deliver in the way that its software algorithm works. Now, Gran Turismo Sport technically doesn't have a wheel partner in that regard. The closest thing is probably Thrustmaster, who sponsor the game and also have their TGT wheel, which has force feedback, which only works with Gran Turismo, and also the T300 RS, which also has a Gran Turismo or PlayStation logo in the centre of it. The force feedback in this is perfectly adequate enough to be able to feel the loss of traction on your front, rear wheels, all wheels, whichever way you want to. There's enough tension in that wheel as you're turning. As you can hear, compared to Formula 1, there are no gear grinds. There's no loud gear rattling or anything like that. And that's mainly because this game doesn't really have that much force feedback at all anyway. You can't really customize any of the force feedback options at all. There's very little that you can actually do, and as a result there's very little other than just being able to drive that you can actually feel. There's not a lot of difference between driving this Ferrari F40, which is a bit like a go-kart, to an actual go-kart or to a single-seater. You don't get that aerodynamic drag feel, you don't get the weight of the car as you're trying to turn in. You get a little bit of tension that tells you that you're oversteering, understeering and things like that, but the actual communication of what's going on around you is very, very poor. So that being said, as the fault of the game potentially, there's actually not that much that the Logitech G29 here can actually do, and therefore it's actually pretty decent. And you would think for where this game is, the price point of the wheel, and being on consoles, that's pretty much perfect really. You can still Tokyo Drift it if you want. Maybe not in a Ferrari, but you know, something else. Now, WRC9 is incredibly interesting, and this is going to cut a few bits here and there because there is a constant tension on the wheel, and this game is very, very good at communicating the changing dynamics of the surfaces from gravel to asphalt to dirt to anything like that. It actually does communicate very well, and it gives you a little bit of tension in the wheel. As you can hear, it feels like it's stretching as you're turning left. It feels like there's something against it. What I am unsure about is where the rattle is coming from on here, because in theory it should be vibration of wheel spin, except the wheels are spinning all of the time, so there isn't really that much. But when you get into really deep corners like this and you pull on the handbrake, you have massive vibration. It's not impact vibration, it's not vibration of the suspension, it's not the wheels locking. I'm not entirely sure what the gear system is trying to convey to me here. I picked this stage in Turkey specifically because I knew it had a lot of hairpins, and also it had quite rough terrain, which should do quite well with this wheel. As you can tell, there's a little bit of vibration as you go through the air, but when you get to this bit, Again, the main wheel provider on this is Fanatec. Previously, Thrustmaster wheels have been used, so maybe it is something that just sort of comes across a lot better in a belt rather than a gear-driven wheel, because it just seems like the gears are communicating something in a very singular way, and it's not entirely sure on what the difference is about what it's communicating. What is it communicating lots of traction? Is it communicating that you're hitting something? Is it communicating that the wheels are spinning on harder surfaces? It's very difficult to tell. Certainly this is one of the things that if you did want to play this game on a Logitech G29, what I would say is definitely turn down the force feedback, because you do not want all of your wrists, but all of them? Both of them, unless you've got more than two hands, who knows. You don't want your wrists to be forever scarred with RSI and a lot of injury. So what is the conclusion on this? Because there are some games, much like Gran Turismo Sport that we've played here, and I know some of the Assetto Corsas as well, where the Logitech is perfectly fine. There isn't this big rattle of trying to communicate some kind of force feedback that it doesn't understand. And that's the only thing I can really think of in this, is that the games being developed are trying to communicate a feeling that it works for a belt-driven wheel. I don't think it works for a gear system wheel. The exception to that possibly is Codemasters, because I know some of their stuff uses True Force with grid, so that might be something to expand upon and maybe try. But for the most part, a lot of these games are tested and probably developed on the higher end wheels, and I'm not just meaning Fanatec, I'm meaning Thrustmasters as well. Obviously they use Logitech wheels to make sure that everything works and it's got a profile and it passes all the testing and validation and quality assurance, so don't worry about that. But it does really feel like a lot of the digital detailing when you get to a gear system feels like it is something that's communicating data as opposed to communicating what a feel is. And because the gear system, certainly from the Codemasters games, seems like it's either on or off, and it's trying to communicate something quite subtle, I would imagine, with that aerodynamic feel as opposed to the actual grip feel or the impact feel, that would make a little bit of sense. WRC9, again, it's obviously trying to communicate something that's granular, I guess, depending on what you are doing, but the gear driven wheel is just on or off in this particular instance. It doesn't know how to communicate it in smaller ways, yet it does communicate in smaller ways at the same time, being able to turn left or right and feel the kind of harshness of the road fighting back at you as you turn in, knowing how to get your slides going on, knowing where the grip is on very different surfaces. I think there's a bit of a 50-50 here. Yes, these games are probably a bit beyond what the grip system, or sorry, the gear system can do now. What it is very clear though, that the gear system can still do it. And once you get to some modification and play around with the settings a little bit, this definitely seems like you'd be able to have a good time with it. And of course, you're not paying a lot of money for this, so why would you? But if you've, like me, you've had your wheel for 4 years now, maybe you're wanting something a little bit more, I say serious, but certainly a little bit better in the feedback, and you feel like maybe that's hampering you, maybe it is time to look elsewhere. And who knows, with the current advances with the next generation consoles coming and the new games that will be coming over the next 7 years or so, and the accessibility of new technologies as they're going, it might be time for Logitech to put the gear system to bed, or at least improve upon it a little bit more, which they haven't really done in 11 years if we're honest. But who knows what will happen in the future. If you've got any thoughts or any comments, please feel free, let us know down below in those comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.